So anyways, just a little reaction to Mark Sievers. The jury recommended that he was sentenced to death. So this is just my little reaction to it. And honestly, I am shocked that he was sentenced to death. I really thought he was going to get life with no parole because he didn't really get his hands dirty. I guess I was thinking they were going to, and then the fact that he has those two little girls and he has such a tight-knit family and everything. But then I guess when you look at it, or at least when I look at it in totality, I don't really feel like Mark did it for the money. And their monetary gain was part of what got him sentenced to death. But I don't know. I'd have to go back and I'd have to listen to Curtis Wainwright's testimony at Sievers' trial. But I really think he wanted his kids, he wanted his life, he wanted his house, he wanted, enough money to feel comfortable, and he didn't want to deal with his little spitfire of a wife anymore. And he just took so many people down with him when he made this plan. He affected so many lives. He affected his kids' lives. He affected all of his wife's his kids' lives, his wife's family, his own family. And then you got to look at Curtis Wainwright. He was just married. So that affects Mr. Wright's family. And then Jimmy Rogers, Jimmy's little girlfriend, she was just pregnant. And Jimmy's in prison. So you look at how many people's lives that this man affected in a negative way. And then just the brutality of the way that she was killed, just the callous brutality, and all those days and hours leading up to her actual moment of death. He could have stopped it at any point. He could have just texted, called, whatever, and told his friends, no, stop, no, I changed my mind. He had all that time to think about it. And, Mrs. Sievers, she didn't get a trial. She didn't get a jury. She didn't get law behind her. She just got sentenced to death, and not an easy death either. When they started talking about the horror of Mrs. Sievers, Dr. Sievers' death, man, that whole claw hammer, and then when even his defense attorney went on and on and on about the displacement of brain matter, that's so graphic. It's so horrific. This is the kitchen where his little girls eat Cheerios, and they scramble eggs, and they have breakfast, and they make cinnamon toast at night, and popcorn in the microwave. And you're talking about, this man arranging to have his wife's, the mother of his children's, literally not just killed, but killed in a very horrific, and it wasn't even a short time, because Curtis Wainwright was talking about his shoulder wasn't, all that great, and he couldn't really hit her hard enough. And she was talking and asking, why? Why? I mean, it's so horrific. And then, like I said, all that talk about displacement of brain matter and just the callousness of it all, and the selfishness. And I don't know, I don't want to say I believe in the death penalty or I don't believe in it. That my opinion doesn't really matter in this case, or it just doesn't matter that much personally. But I have read a lot of statistics and even written a paper back in college and I don't know if it's changed because I haven't kept up with it, but the thought of death penalty doesn't really affect crime rate. People don't stop and think, hey, I could get a needle in my arm for this. It doesn't deter crime, or at least it didn't, I think, about 10 years ago when I was doing research. And it doesn't really deter crime. So it's just not effective. But then I see what they do too. They say, well, if you're going to go to trial, you could be facing the death penalty. And so they plead out. They say, well, let's take death off the table and then I'll just plead to something, I'll just sit in prison for the rest of my life. And Mark Sievers, he worked in a casino, so he knows all about gambling. And I guess he just felt like he had enough to gamble, and he was willing to roll those dice. And this time the dice, they just did not come up in his favor. Not at all. And he got death. And he'll have to go through his whole appeal process and everything. And he'll sit around for, 12 years or something in prison, and have time to think about what he did. But he's always got that date looming over his head of that needle in his arm, At least, and before I go, I just want to say how sad I feel for his kids. His two daughters, now their mom is gone, and now Teresa's family or somebody has to go home and tell those girls now they're going to put your dad to death. I mean, it's so horrific. It's just so horrific. It's so horrible. The whole thing is so tragic and so horrible. Anyway, those are my thoughts. That's my reaction to his death, sentencing to death of Mark Sievers. So, okay. Love to hear what you have to say.